The Museum of the American Cocktail is one of the Southern Food and Beverage Museum in New Orleans' great collections. Although other places can lay claim to definite milestones in the life story of the cocktail, no place has embraced the cocktail as passionately as New Orleans. Greater New Orleans was the primary home of absinthe in the United States, was a hub of rum production, and was a place where the finest cognacs were served in homes and restaurants alike. Mixed drinks are inextricably connected with New Orleans, as are two particular cocktails, the Sazerac and the Ramos Gin Fizz, but we'll get to those in a minute. First, let's talk about the history of the cocktail. Distilled spirits have been around since the Middle Ages, but it was not until the early 1800s that the modern idea of the cocktail was born. Of course, this idea was born in America, where freedom from continental pretension allowed for more creativity. But before there was a cocktail, there were patent medicines. Patent medicines of the 1700s and 1800s were marketed as cures for anything. In order to make them tasty, patent medicines were spiced and flavored. These medicines are frequently referred to as snake oil. Bartenders simply referred to them as bitters. While bitters had been added to waters, seltzers, and other beverages, no one had yet decided to add those bitters to a spirit. The first widely popular bitters came from England, Stoughton's bitters, and these bitters were probably used in the first cocktail. The innovation of adding bitters to a spirit was first recognized as a cocktail in an article in the Farmer's Cabinet, a newspaper from Amherst. After it first appeared in 1803, the cocktail was on its way. Soon, a standard formula appeared: sugar, bitters, water, and 2 ounces of a spirit. The first cocktails were brandy or whiskey based. Garnishes came later, as did experimentation with spirits beyond the traditional brandy or whiskey. As cocktails further developed, drinking cocktails of this style became old-fashioned, hence the name for the popular drink of whiskey, sugar, water, and bitters. Soon, distillers were creating their own bottles and labels. Because many spirits were sold in bulk and could be adulterated, the bottling and branding of liquor became a way to differentiate yourself and guarantee quality. These bottles of Old Crow from the 1870s were some of the first to have their own labels. Within a few decades, multicolor labels, boxes, and other branding would become first possible and then quite popular as a way to create spirit brand awareness and customer loyalty. As cocktails caught on, it was not long before gin was introduced to the cocktail pantheon through the Martini. The origin of the Martini is shrouded in myth and sufficiently obscure that even Dave Wondrich, the great spirits writer, could narrow down the legitimate claims of invention to at least 4 sources. As we mentioned before, New Orleans was on the forefront of this rise in drinking culture. The Ramos Gin Fizz, a mixture of gin, citrus juice, sugar, egg, and cream, was one of New Orleans' first major cocktail contributions. When shaken, the cocktail emulsifies and grows right out of the glass. Shaking this cocktail requires an enormous amount of effort. Ramos, the inventor of the Gin Fizz, had up to 35 bartenders shaking cocktails during his busiest times. At the museum, we have a Gin Fizz shaker that saved the arms of many a bartender who used it. The Sazerac is another New Orleans contribution to the cocktail pantheon. In the 1880s, the Sazerac was first mixed in New Orleans by Antoine Peychaud. His bitters mixed perfectly into a whiskey cocktail with a dash of absinthe. When absinthe became illegal, so did the Sazerac. That is until Herb Saint was invented, and the Sazerac continued at its headquarters, the Sazerac Hotel on Royal Street, until Prohibition shut it down. Speaking of Prohibition, the cocktail was really stretching its wings in the early 1900s, just in time for Prohibition to be enacted and destroy all that had been built. Prohibition was a dark time for American food and beverage. Imagine the places you go to now that serve food and don't serve alcohol. Now imagine those are the only places to legally go. The erosion of good taste and conviviality brought about Prohibition stuck with America long into the 50s and 60s. While drinking remained an important pastime, it was forced underground. The criminality and corruption of the Prohibition era is legendary, as are the bootleggers who proved the old saying, you can make it illegal, but you can't make it unpopular. After Prohibition, the American cocktail took some time to recover. Popular books on cocktail making released in the 30s and 40s helped eager home bartenders, but in many public drinking establishments, powdered drink mixes became the standard. Most experimentation in cocktails occurred at the margins, with styles like tiki coming to represent the cutting edge of cocktail culture through the 50s and 60s. With the popularity of wine in the 70s and 80s, the cocktails took a back seat in American culture, and much of old cocktail culture was lost or forgotten. In the 90s, a new generation of bartenders came on the scene determined to bring back classic cocktails and classic culture. It is through the efforts of these bartenders and spirits organizations, as well as organizations like Tales of the Cocktail, that have brought culture back to the cocktail. The revival of cocktail culture is so complete, one can now order a well-mixed drink in almost every city in America. Visit us in New Orleans to see the full collection and learn more about the history of the cocktail.